amazing what's happened with you.
Oh man, um, I give all the glory to Him, man. I give all
Thank
the,
God.
I give all the glory.
Thank God for you and your family and your kids. And I'm glad you made it out, man.
Thank you, man. It means a lot. You know, it means a lot. It gets me a little emotional, man. Man, I'm grateful.
Hey, those
Grateful, man.
tears right there that you have that you're holding back, like if they had words, what would they say?
Just gratitude, man. Just gratitude. Grateful for a second chance. My name is Ronny Salazar. I was born in Los Angeles, California, Westwood to be exact, UCLA Hospital. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here. I really wanted to get into a little bit of the history of, where you came from and how, things started for you, specifically with the gangs. And how old were you when you first got into a gang?
Oh, I was real young, but it didn't start off like that. We started off as skateboarders. We're just these kids out on the street skateboarding up and down the neighborhood.
What
And
neighborhood was that?
a neighborhood out there in West LA. There was a Crenshaw district. We used to race up and down the street named Bronson. So that's really
Around how old were you? Skateboard stuff?
the skateboarding stuff. We were like in our middle school. Middle school, we were like probably like 15, 16. Around that age.
And then where did it start? Like, did you get jumped into the gang, or how did that work?
Well, you know what? It's since we were all friends, and we were already in a gang neighborhood. That those neighborhoods were already there. Not to mention any names, or because my purpose is not to glorify the gang life, or mention any names. Things like that come back on people, and so I'm well aware of using names, people's names, or things of that nature.
Yeah,
But I know
we don't need to use any of those names.
absolutely not.
Yeah, okay.
But growing up in that, in an area in Los Angeles next to South Central, West LA, South Central, we just started off as innocent kids, skateboarding up and down the street. And my dad moved in with my aunt, which is his sister. And I moved in with my dad, of course. My dad took me in after him and my mom ended up separated and their marriage ended up in divorce. We stopped going to church. I was born I was raised in a Christian household, but we stopped going to church.
Why do you think you stopped going?
Um, I could
Was it because
say
your dad wasn't there, or?
I could say because once I moved in with my dad and my dad took me in and we moved in with my aunt, my dad's sister, I guess church was no longer, it's like we started to forget, about the Lord, His Word, church. I guess that's something that we did as a family, and it was a routine thing as a family. And since the family was broken up, we no longer took on that routine anymore. So I started slowly slipping away, hanging out with the kids in that building that I got to know. And I started getting to know the kids in the building next to ours. And then the kids which was a house next to that building. Next thing you know, we're starting to get to know kids on the block over, and now we're all walking to school, skating. It all started innocently like that. Us on skateboards, and one thing led to the next. We started ditching school, and things started to progress and get worse. Smoking. I got introduced to marijuana, alcohol, and then the gangs that were already set in that area, pressure started coming our way. and that the bad influence was there.
Pressure for what?
Pressure to, join that gang or those gangs in that area.
Did you have an initiation into that gang?
They were pressing for us to get initiated into that gang, but we used to tell them all the time, "Hey man, we're just skaters. We live here. We're just skaters. We don't want no part of it. It's just us. We're just friends. We're just skating here."
But they kept pushing for it.
It kept pushing. There came a time where I remember being bullied in middle school, running out of the school, because being a church kid, I didn't know how to fight. I was never introduced to fighting, fist fighting, and that kind of world, that kind of mutual combat, that kind of stuff. The streets and running up and down the street was new to me. I was a church kid.
It started with skateboarding. Then you started to get some pressure from probably a local gang. And tell me how it progressed, like from there. Because you had to run out of the school. You said there was something about a fight. You didn't know how to fight.
Yeah, I was just a church-going kid, growing up mostly in a church environment, going to retreats, not really being a kid that was always running outside. My parents were, I'm not going to say super strict, but they were, I could say on a medium scale of being strict.
But your dad's no longer in the picture at this point, right?
My dad is, yeah.
He was.
He was.
And again, we're talking about maybe 12 years old, 11, 10?
Yeah, 12, 11, yeah, that's around the time, sounds about right, 12, 11, 13, when they announced to me and my sister, instead of taking it to court, we're going to decide who y'all want to go live with. We don't want the court to get involved. We feel that y'all two, or me and my sister, she's 3 years younger than me, are old enough to know at least, not all the details, but what's going on. We're no longer going to be
and
together.
Who did you pick?
And I picked my dad, but not only after my sister right away picked my mom. Boom. She had already made up her mind. My mom, told her, come live with me. And my mom told me, only your dad could teach you how to be a man, so you should go stay with your dad.
Got it.
I was kind of hesitant. My sister right away picked my mom. I wanted them to stay together. Their separation and divorce hurt me. It affected me. Maybe at the time, I could, it didn't. Maybe at the time, or at least, it felt like it didn't, but it did.
When did the violence start?
Once things started to progress, once the pressure started coming harder from the local gangs, we went from being skaters to graffiti artists in the streets. They call them taggers, and other tagging crews were involved. And as we became graffiti artists, taggers, we all made up AKAs for each other, aliases. For example, mine was Slim. I used to be even more skinnier, so I used to write Slim. It's an innocent tagging crew name. Everybody had AKAs, but other tagging crews, I used to see us up on the walls, and they used to come, and out of hatred, maybe they were envious, maybe just to start something, they'll come and just cross us out. We'll cross them out. Next thing you know, whenever we did run into these individuals from this other tagging crew, right away it became a fight. And that's how the violence started, with other tagging crew, with other graffiti artists that we found out crossed us out. And the pressure kept coming from the local gangs because they started telling us, stop rioting in our neighborhood. This is our neighborhood, this is our street, this is our hood. And we're not okay, we respect that. But yet us being young, stubborn, rebellious, not wanting to listen and trying to make a point because we're graffiti artists and we still wanted to write on the walls. We refused, so we kept writing. And the pressure kept coming and it eventually turned into violence, and then we ended up getting shot at by the local.
Was that the first time that you were shot at?
Yeah, that was the first time we got shot at by the local gang in that area. They warned us the last time, and they told us, and it was a fair, strong warning.
So they didn't really intend to kill you at that point. It was more of a scare tactic? Or do you think they shot to try to kill you?
I think they shot maybe intentionally trying to kill.
But they missed.
They missed. Nobody got hit. Maybe they didn't. But when bullets come out of a gun, even when you're shot at, with the intention of not being killed by other person, sometimes those bullets hit people. People die.
So it escalated. So I'm imagining that you guys waged revenge on them as well.
Yes, and at that moment, some of my friends that were skaters, graffiti artists at the moment, got scared. They left. They said, we didn't sign up for this. You guys are taking it too far now. We were in this to smoke weed, hang out with the girls.
But you didn't leave.
I didn't leave, and there's a group of us that didn't leave. We, had a point to prove. We wanted to stand our ground. We weren't going to let these guys intimidate us, but a bunch of our friends said, oh, you guys are going at it with the local gang now. These guys are serious. These other coming with artillery. They have weapons. They're killers. They're not playing with y'all. You guys are young. You guys have no weapon. You guys are not even a gang.
How long were you in that gang life for?
For years, from a very young age.
From 11 or 12 to what?
Maybe a little further along. I didn't start that early. There's some youngsters out there, young men who start that early. I didn't. Mine came, I was possibly, I was already into the graffiti stuff, maybe 17.
17.
17.
And then did the crimes become more serious at that point?
17, 18. Yes, it started to escalate. Things started getting worse.
Escalate to what?
Escalate to homicides, attempted murders. Two of my friends got killed. I remember at a flyer party. They used to have these flyer parties back then. There were
flower party?
Flyers, like
flyer.
Like the flyer parties.
Yeah, what does that mean?
I remember back then there was a news report. There was a special on flyer parties taking place all over LA several years ago in the early 2000s. They used to, kids, teenagers, high school kids used to find abandoned warehouses. And they used to have these flyer parties, and they had these postcard type of flyers, and they used to pass them out. Word used to get around.
It's like a pop-up party.
Yes,
and
like
they
a
would
rave.
do, it's a rage.
Okay,
got it.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
And then at those rave flyer parties, people from everywhere, all over LA County used to show up. Gang members from, different parts of, the county.
So I imagine there were fights in there. There was violence and shootings.
And for that very reason, I was one of the ones that did not like to go to these flyer parties, because you had dudes from gangs from everywhere come and.
But you did go.
And you did, and then maybe.
You didn't want to go, but you said you did?
I went maybe like once, but.
Only one time?
If I remember correctly, maybe once.
Okay.
Twice, and these was like like they call them parties at houses, like backyard boogies, like house parties.
Yes.
As far as like flower parties, like the raves, I don't recall ever going to one, and I was real firm on not going, because I know it always resulted in shootings, deaths. From what I remember, there was these guys named Pretty Boys. We used to call them the Pretty Boys. These are the guys that used to set up the flower parties. The guys that used to wear two hats, do-rags, headbands, basketball gear, different colors. The Pretty Boys used to be geared up, wear all kind of Nike, Jordan attire. And they used to be the ones that used to set up these flyer parties, and they used to even pat down the males going in at these parties. What the males used to do is either hide their guns well or used to pass on their guns to the females. The females didn't get patted down. So they were the ones who took the guns into these flower parties. So there was several people in there with guns in these flower parties, and it always resulted in deaths and violence.
When was the first time you were arrested?
I could say 15, 16.
Okay. That was the first time.
Yes, 15, 16.
And then I'm assuming that you repeat offender?
Yes. After that.
So it started at 15, 16, then get arrested again?
Yes.
For what?
Grand Theft Auto. I remember possibly even possession of a firearm, if I remember correctly. It was several Grand Theft Autos that led me to juvenile hall, juvenile camps. I did a couple juvenile camp programs.
What was that experience like?
It was scary. It was scary. It was foreign. It was if I could say it was like you kind of felt lonely a bit. It was scary. But after the first time, you start to adapt and you start to get used to it. After that, you're numb to.
So you went to juvie a few times?
Yeah.
Got it. And then the crimes escalated?
They did. They did.
When you got out and when you became an adult, I assume?
Yes.
Again, this is up to you, whether you want to continue talking about it, but maybe you can tell me a little more about what happened there and how you ended up being incarcerated.
Yeah, sure. I could say once I turned 18, my juvenile record was sealed, became an adult. The last time I got out of the last camp program I did was at Camp Scudder. I even graduated high school. I remember them even doing a ceremony for me. My parents showed up for my graduation. I graduated high school from that camp. Once I got out from that last camp program at 18 years old already, so I was already considered a grown man. And I still remember the first case that I caught as already an 18-year-old man was for a possession of a firearm, for a gun. When I did time for that, it was some minor time, 180 days, 10% in the county jail for a gun. I probably only did like maybe 38 days, if I remember correctly. It was 38 or 28 days, 10% out of those 180, and I got back and I got out, but that pistol, that possession of firearm went on my record now as an adult. When I came home after that, after my first arrest as an adult, after doing time in the county jail, my dad had had enough. I had dragged my dad back and forth to juvenile court, juvenile halls, visits. He used to bring me personals, and that's hygiene products, all kind of stuff that he used to just bring me, and he was always there. But it was at that point, finally at 18, he had enough. He told me to leave. He called the police. Never did I ever think my dad would do that, but he was so infuriated. He was just to the point where, that's it. I had to go. He cut ties. He didn't stop being my father, but he said I had to go.
How old were you when that happened?
I was 18. I was 18 going on 19. He put a restraining order on me that I remember him slapping me, and we got into like a little argument back and forth. I even flipped over a table in rage because he wanted me to go. I said, I'm not leaving. He slapped me, put his hands on me, but I never put my hands on my dad because he was always there. I never had just the nerve to do it, even though he slapped me, put his hands on me. He even called me out and said, hit me, hit me, hit me. But I held back. I couldn't. He was always there. It probably would have turned out different if he wasn't there and he put his hands on me, but I could never build up the courage to put his hands on him.
Right. And so You ended up doing 16 years?
A total of 16 years.
So that sounds like it's for some pretty serious crimes.
Yeah, I got convicted. I was already in prison serving a term. I forget if it was, I think it was if it was a 4-year term for vandalism, right? With a gang enhancement on that vandalism. Something minor. Got arrested for something that was, I was charged for something that basically I ended up being a mistaken identity over, but those charges were dropped, so they had to get me for something. You know, that's just the way the streets work. You know, you're a gang member, you're out here running around, running amok, they call it, just running the streets wild, then police is gonna get you for something. And so all the neighborhood was tagged up with graffiti. You know, they pinned that on me because the tattoos that I had matched the graffiti that was on the wall. So I went down for vandalism. While serving that term for 4 years, I ended up catching an in-house case. If you're a gang member, you know, the gang life continues in prison. You have to prove yourself in there too. It doesn't stop. If you've been really one of those that has been really with that kind of activity, really about that lifestyle, the gang life doesn't stop in there. Some people think it stops, it doesn't, it continues.
So what happened in prison?
And so being in that world now I'm in a different world now. You know, it's treacherous in there. It's a dog eat dog world, lion eat lion. You have to prove yourself. You know, the time is going to come around when something's going to happen, either a mass, whether it be a riot, different races, or just within your own car. They call your own car as race. And just whether it be over money, whatever it might be, over drugs, territory on the yard. It's always politics in there, and it's a scary environment. But you have to be a man, and sometimes you have to go against that fear and really suppress it, hold it in, and not let weakness be seen, even though you might be frightened, it might be scary. And I was scared a lot of those times when things like that happen with other races, riots, or I was told to go do this, go do that. It's just the way it is in there. There's always a chain of command, whether in there, out here. People always have people over them, supervisors, bosses, and in that gang world, there's always someone over you, you know. And
are you comfortable talking about what happened there, like the serious thing that happened in prison? Up to you.
Yeah, it just not with I could say with too much detail, just to keep it basic, general, which is something that really I'm pretty sure the audience, the public knows. I mean, they're portrayed in movies. Without mentioning any names for any groups or whatever. But you know, I was convicted for one homicide and a murder and 2 attempted murders, and gun enhancement and gang enhancement. To be exact, when I got found guilty by a court of law, members of the jury found me guilty. To be exact, in downtown LA, the criminal courts building in downtown, they found me guilty of all charges. I thought I had the case beat, but I didn't. And to be exact, they gave me 138 years to life. I don't know how they come up with these numbers, but that's what it was, 138 years to life. I was married already at the time.
That was for 2 attempted murders and 1 homicide.
1 homicide and 2 attempted murders.
2 attempted murders.
And gun and gang enhancement.
That was all in prison?
That was on the outside.
That was on the outside.
On the outside. So I got convicted for all that.
So none of the homicides took place inside the prison?
No, that was the homicide and the 2 attempted homicides happened on the outside. And I was already incarcerated. I was already in prison when homicide detectives, LAPD, came to get me. I was out of state in prison in Arizona. At that time, Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor to California. At that time, prisons in California were overpopulated. So California got a contract with out-of-state prisons to be able to send inmates to other states, Oklahoma, Mississippi. I only made it as far as Arizona because I only had a little bit of time, like 4 years to be exact. And I was almost home. And a couple months away from paroling, from going home, here come homicide detectives, LAPD, to come get me. They say, we have a warrant for your arrest. The judge signed for us to come get you for an attempt, from murder to attempted murders from 2012 to 2000, I believe it was 2012.
How many years after?
Oh no, I'm
the
sorry.
crime?
They came to get me in 2012, but the crime was from 2007. I'm sorry. So
2007.
Yes.
So like all those years later,
So
they
all
had
those years later.
put together evidence.
Yes, they were just, building, investigating, putting evidence. So it was from 7 to 12 was that 5 years. And when there's a murder, there's no statute of limitations. So they took all them years investigating, building a case, and I came into the case, and there was already 2 co-defendants of mine already in the case.
And you were tried
I was
for these crimes, and you ended up getting a sentence. You said 30 to 80. How many years?
138 years to life. So basically, that was like a life sentence. 100.
Yeah, you were going to be a lifer.
I became a lifer at that point.
And then how is it that you got out with 16 years served? By the way, were you isolated when you were doing your time, or were you in general population?
I started off in general population. I was,
You started off.
Yes.
And then what happened?
General population. Along the way, running amok, doing what Southern Hispanics do, doing what the gang world does. As far as Hispanics do, Latinos in prison, those that are involved in the gang life.
Then you ended up in isolation.
When you commit a crime in prison, you get placed in isolation. They call it administrative segregation. You get placed. They call that the hole.
You were in the hole?
I was in the hole several times for incidents that I had done in prison.
How long are you in the hole for at a time?
Depends on the severity of your crime.
Give me an idea of like how much time you spent in a hole at a time. Would it be?
Like I remember one time I did a year shoot term security housing unit. Started off in that SIG, and then you get transferred to the big house, the big hole. It was a year for a battery on a correctional officer. Even in the gang world, when you live in that life in the general population, sometimes even the correctional officers could get out of hand, or something happens with the correctional officers in there, and even they get assaulted or even stabbed. Sometimes there's even killed in there. The
longest time you did in the hole was how long?
A year.
And what was that like?
It was terrible. It was it's not a beautiful thing. It's not a.
I mean, all you're left there is with all your thoughts, right?
Yeah, I mean, you do get once you're transferred to a big hole, the big security housing unit, you do get a choice of an electronic radio. Now I heard it's changed. You do get a radio. But at that time, you either got a radio, CD player, or a TV.
And how much time are you able to get outside of your cell?
It was every other day, I believe you came outside. But it
for
was
an hour or so to exercise?
Maybe more than an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. But it was in a cage. It was either in a cage by yourself and your cellmate, if you had a cellmate, if you were in a walk alone, or because there's several people in there, they're profiled. Some are the way that they're profiled, the way that everybody has a different profile, and so depending on what you've done, your history in prison, how serious you are, how dangerous that person might be. There are a lot of dangerous people in there.
Can I ask you what the biggest lesson was for you that you learned by being in prison?
Biggest lesson was, I could say, humility. That was learning to be humble in a place where, you.
But how did you arrive at that? How did you, at 16 years, how did you arrive? How did you become humble?
I had to be broken. I had to be brought down to size.
You think the isolation did that?
Isolation, the drug use,
You hit bottom.
I finally hit bottom in my drug use. I started injecting heroin and meth into my veins. I would never allow myself to get to that point. I had cellmates, other individuals that I saw that did that. And I never wanted to allow myself to get to that point, but I did. And one day, I wasn't as high as my cellmate was because I used to go every now and then up the nose. I always used to smoke weed, drink prison-made alcohol. But, I started going up the nose every once in a while with heroin, meth, every now and then. I used to dibble and dabble. But one day I remember seeing my cellie so high that I asked him, "Why are you so high and I'm not?" And he said, "That's because you're wasting it. You're not going to the vein." I said, "Psh, forget you. Forget that. I'll never do that." And my cellmate also had hepatitis. So sharing a needle with him also means that I would expose myself to hepatitis C. And I did. The time came where I just stuck on my arm one night and I told him, "Hit me." And my cellmate thought that I was playing. And he looked at me, he said, "Don't play with me." And I said, I'm not playing with you, I'm serious. Go ahead, hit me. And he looked at me like, "Man, you're BSing." I said, "I'm not, I'm serious, hit me." Once several times of repetition of him finally concluding that I was not playing, he just packed that needle and hit me, and everything started to go downward after that. I became an addict.
How many years?
I think it was maybe like a total of almost 2 years.
2 years of full-on
Full-on
intravenous addiction.
addiction, bringing in dope through visiting. My wife got involved even in that stuff. I got her involved. She even separated herself started to walk, she stopped going to church. She used to tell me about God all the time, but I was like, "Man, I'm doing me right now. I'm doing, I'm thugging, I'm living this life." Even though I did believe, even though the Lord was in my heart and I was a believer, but I wasn't living like one. I wasn't surrendered.
So where is the moment? What was the moment? Because I know you hit bottom, you were doing drugs for 2 years straight. There must have been a day that you woke up and said, enough.
Yeah.
What happened?
Great question. There's been, several people who've asked that. The addiction brought me down to my knees. I remember ending up in a hole the last time. I was so, just my arm was filled with holes from time that I missed, times that I've hit into my vein. And, I was already, I had already turned my back on the gang life, general population. I didn't want to live like that anymore. I didn't want to do evil, continue to do violence, stabbings, and even kill. I had already got convicted for a murder. The time came around when, I had to go and kill. And everyone gets their turn when they're living, that kind of life still in general population. Your turn will come. You have to prove yourself. And when my time came, I didn't want to go through with it. I was going to at first, I remember my wife telling me at visit, you know, you're gonna push me and your sons away if you do this. We're not gonna push you away. You're pushing us away. You know, God told me you're coming home, you know, and I believe that you are, and I'm staying with you. But if you commit a in-house murder, if you continue to live this life in here, they're never gonna let you out. You'll be a monster. You just prove to the courts that you are a monster. They're never gonna release somebody like that.
So it sounds like she really had an influence then on you,
Yes, she did.
on you not committing that last murder.
Yeah, you know, I didn't want to go. She did have an influence. I mean, I didn't want to go on living like that. If you stick around, you know, your time will come when you have to go, commit violence, murder, whatever.
Because
Or,
if you don't,
you know,
then it's going to be your life.
yeah. They, you know, they
Is
made
that right?
they made movies, you know, of you know, of prison, the prison life, and even though some of it is exaggerated and some of it is, you know,
But you had a choice, either kill
yes.
or be killed. Does that sound about right?
Yep. And I like to tell people I had a choice. Either you choose life or you choose death. You choose light or you choose darkness. And I chose life. I chose light.
You had something to live for because you had your wife, right?
Yeah, a lot of fellas in there, they don't have family members. Their families gave up on them, walked away. I felt that pain. You know, I felt, you know, what hurt me the most being in there is knowing that my wife will not go away. I try to give her that speech that a lifer gives his family, his wife, you know, go on, just move on, be happy. I'll be selfish if I was to try to hold on to you, you know, and try to make you stay in my corner.
You had that conversation with her?
And that was one of the hardest conversations I had to have, you know, and since I was already a lifer at that time, and I didn't ever call myself a lifer, by the way, in there, because if I did, I never gave up hope. I always said to myself, because a lot of fellas in there, they have given up hope, you know, whether in protective custody, whether in general population, and even though I did turn my back on the gang life, I did drop out. I no longer wanted to keep living a life of violence and continue to live life on the edge in a tense environment where you always have to look around. And even when you're in a chow hall, you always have to look back and something could go off in the blink of an eye. Boom, or somebody could just go behind you and just start stabbing you in the neck. That's the way you gotta live in there. You know, turning your neck every couple seconds, because anything could happen at any time. I just didn't want to live like that. I didn't want to continue living in an environment or do the things that come with living in an environment like that. So I turned my back on the gang life. I dropped out. I didn't want it anymore. I hung the gloves up and I got reevaluated. You know, a profile as a dropout. You know, as a dropout. It's just something that had to happen for me. It was the hardest thing that I ever had to do. Pride had me like this.
What does a dropout mean?
A dropout means you are no longer running general population. You're no longer running with the gang, with the prison politics. You're no longer, you give up your street credibility, your gangster. You turn in your car.
That must have been a pretty big deal for you to do that.
It's pride had me. That was the hardest thing I ever had to do because the gang life is all I knew. You know, it's all I knew. And once I turned my back on it, I felt shame. I felt guilty. I felt regret. I want to go back. What did I do? No, I felt like I was miserable for a while. I went through depression. Thoughts of suicide came. I felt like even killing myself.
Because that was your identity.
That was
for so many years.
Exactly. That was my identity, and I didn't even know it. But that's who I had become. That was my identity.
When did you find God?
In 2018, my wife had a big influence on me. She kept whispering me about God, and even though I got her involved in drugs and bringing me in drugs and phones.
So she started talking to you about God,
She
and
always talked to me about God. There
she
was,
always did?
yeah, she did. There was even times in there when I went to the chapel service high, because I still believed, and I even got, heat over it from the fellas, from the homies. Like, oh, all of a sudden you're going to church. Oh, hell nah. What? Come on, man. And I still went to the chapel. I still went to services when they called services. But was I a committed follower of Christ? Was I a true Christian at that time? No, I wasn't. I was just a believer.
Well, how did it grow? Because you eventually met Miles, and he started working with you. How far into your sentence did Miles come around and start working with you?
I met him once I was already in the county jail in 2018, mid 2018, when, by the grace of God, to God be the glory, my conviction got reversed. The Court of Appeal,
How did that happen?
man, the Lord, man. I give him the glory. I had two co-defendants in my case. They both took deals in order to testify against me. I know one of them, well, I believe they both did at first, but one of them had even recanted, had taken back statements and on the stand. The second trial, detectives impeached him. Oh, now you're saying that it wasn't Ronnie, but this is what you said prior. And so that's why I was the only one left to go to trial. I was convicted as being the shooter to that crime, right? But I met Miles in 2018 on my appeal, and that was the same year that I gave my life to Christ. The drugs and everything, I was spiraling.
So it was after you won your appeal? Or during?
After, because I had already found out that my appeal was granted.
So you were thinking to yourself, God's with me. I have to change my life. I have to acknowledge
what's going on here.
Yeah.
This wasn't the first thing that I experienced. There was things along the way, warnings, things where I almost got caught up for bringing in drugs. I could have got my children, my wife caught up, my children.
So it was a series of events.
Yes, but
then you had your wife influencing you with God and the Bible, and it seems like you had some angels around you, man, taking care of you.
I'm telling you, there were several times where things happened in a way so I was like, wow, I could have got caught up, but this happens to where, to prevent me from being caught. Things that didn't allow me to proceed and go on with the things that I wanted to do several times. And my wife kept telling me, you see, that's God. See, you're not listening, we're not listening. And I was like, man, there was a point where I used to talk to my wife in an abusive manner. I used to say, man, shut up. You're just going to do what I tell you. I've already made plans. I already set this in place. I can't go back on my word. Once you give your word, you got to keep it, and it came to the point where that was it. Even after I had dropped out and I was now on the prison yards that was protective custody, in prison, they call them SNY yards, even though the lifestyle still continues. And there's still gang life, there's still drug trade, there's still drug sales, there's still drugs and cell phones and everything of that nature. But in 2018, while I was in the whole detoxing, I had to get off the yard. I had an episode where I was too high on meth, heroin. I flipped out. I was seeing stuff. I was hallucinating. Maybe it wasn't hallucination. Maybe, after being up for several days, seeing shadows, seeing stuff that I wasn't supposed to see. Maybe that opened up my eyes to the other realm, spiritual realm, and I saw demonic stuff. I was flipping out. I was wigging out. I was losing my mind, and I ended up in a hole the last time, and that's where I just cried my eyes out, and I cried out for God at that moment. Lord, help me stop. I couldn't. My addiction had me by the cojones. It had me by the balls. Excuse my language, but it had me. I tried to stop on my own. I tried to walk away from the addiction. I tried to stop doing drugs for a minute, but I ended up always going right back to it. The needle in my arm was it was too powerful, too strong for me to stop on my own. So I needed a higher power and intervention. So when I hit rock bottom, that's when I cried out, you know, for Christ, for the Lord. Lord, help me stop, remove these urges, these cravings that I have so that I don't have to go back to that. And after I cried my eyes out and I called on God, I experienced God's presence because I exercised faith at that moment. And not only was there a weight lifted, but I felt immediately that the craving, the urge, the desire to want to do that was removed, taken away, like instantly like that. Something that I couldn't do when I cried out for help to God, it just happened instantaneously. God did something in the blink of an eye so fast that I couldn't do, for years. And that's all it took for me to exercise faith in the unseen. And when I did, things started to change. I went back to the county jail. A little bit after that, same year that I found out, on my wife's birthday, that's another thing I forgot to mention. April 26, 2018, my wife's birthday. I called her from prison. I had already dropped out. I'm already in the protective custody prison yard. I'm just calling my wife to tell her happy birthday. I call her. I sense something is wrong. She's stalling. She tells me afterward, because I tell her, like, what's going on? She's like, you're not going to believe this. And I was like, quit stalling me. I told her, like, what's going on? Spit it out. Like, what is it you have to tell me? She's like, I just got an email from your appellate attorney. And he just said that your appeal has been granted. Your conviction has been fully reversed by the Court of Appeal. You're going back to the county jail. I said, oh my God, are you serious? You're lying. He said, I'm not lying. I wouldn't lie to you about this, I said, I couldn't not believe it. I froze and I was just in shock and unbelief. And it started to become more real. And then soon after that, that's when I ended up in a whole detoxing. I had that episode and I gave my life to Christ and little by little started going to church. I ended up getting baptized before I went to the county jail and went all the way in for the Lord. That's when I got baptized, initiated just like gang has initiation.
Yeah, all of a sudden you're in a Christian gang.
Now it's a Christian.
Yeah,
now I'm in the
a gang.
kingdom. Now I'm in God's army, in God's gang. I got initiated into the kingdom and I took that step because I knew all along that I had to surrender. A lot of people don't know what surrender is. So how am I supposed to surrender? But it's at your breaking point, when you recognize finally surrender, let go. And when police tell you to surrender, you gotta surrender and say, Lord, I'm done. Basically, just to summarize, I'm done doing things on my own, living life by my standards, by my rules. I'm gonna now live life how you want me to live it according to your word. And even though we all fall short and nobody could obey that Bible perfectly, when you have the presence of the Holy Spirit in you because you accepted Christ, and you pray, and you fast, and you stay committed to the word, going to church, ministry, fellowship, then that Holy Spirit helps you to live the Christian life that you could not possibly live on your own, in your own strength. And power as a human being. And so I got initiated into the kingdom when I got baptized in 2018. Soon after that, I went and I got transferred to the county jail, my appeal. And I was there from 2018 to 2024 of last year, February 15, 5 years and a half fighting my appeal.
I want to ask you one final question. What would you tell your younger self? What advice would you give to your younger self about either the decision you made, or if someone were watching this video, what would be your advice to a young person that is considering being in a gang?
That's a very great question. I've been asked that before and I never really gave it much thought. What would I say to my younger self, or to a young man going in the direction that I went? I would say, your life is worth living, not wasting it away. If you go that way, you go the route that I went, it's a life of pain, suffering, and it's a lot of wasted time, a wasted life. You're not going to get educated. You're going to keep doing things in a repetitive manner. They're only going to get you in trouble. They're only going to get you into the worst places. Not into the best colleges or universities. They're going to get you into the worst places. But yet your pride makes you happy, excited about being in those places. And you start to brag about it. Oh, I've been to this prison. I've been to this prison, the hardest prisons in California. I've done this, I've done that. I've been with this person, that person. And people start dropping names and that makes you a big shot. You're proud of these things. And those are things that we should be ashamed of, because out here in the real world, when it comes time for you to fill out a resume, what are you going to put? I've been to 32 prisons, I stabbed 15 guys. You're going to turn in your resume, when you'll be looked at like you're stupid and not just that, but get out of here. We won't hire somebody like you. That's all you have. So I will tell, I don't know, my younger self or a younger man going in that direction, don't make the same mistake that I made. Don't be stupid. Don't be foolish. You're trying to prove a point to who? For what? Why are you proving yourself to, other men out here that say they love you, but you're going to come to find out that even those that they say they love you are not going to be there for you, weeks, months, or years from now. They'll leave you. But we have somebody who'll never leave us. And he promised that I'll never leave you nor forsake you. And I will be with you always to the end of the age. In Christ, Jesus, my Lord, said that. He's been with me all throughout ever since I could remember. But that's what I will say to somebody, a young man going in that direction. That's what I even say to my own son, 16 and 13, who my good brother Miles has met. His family has become my family. They've been there with me. I remember Miles, he even brought his son in there one time into the county jail, the chaplain. He used to bring in guests, walk the tiers. He used to have men even more tattooed than I was, with their arms sticking out the bars. And he used to come and you visit us. And he used to bring the word, and sometimes even Christmas, candy canes. We used to love those times because that's the only time we got something from the outside, candy canes and cards and even a chocolate maybe. Those were like the good old times. Like, ooh, I haven't had a candy cane or chocolate in years. We used to eat it real slow too, like take little bites of the corner, suck on a piece of that candy cane for a while. But that's where I got to meet Brother Miles in there. He's a chaplain in the LA County Jail. He still goes there to serve the Lord and brings the message of the gospel in there. And I tell my sons that same thing, man. Don't go the route that I went. Don't waste your life.
What's the greatest thing that you're thankful for?
Man. The greatest thing is, salvation, man. Salvation, knowing that I'm in the kingdom, knowing that I have a place in God's house, knowing that he snatched somebody like me up, and was merciful to me and snatched me up and didn't give up on me. Something when I think about it brings me to tears. I could have not got my freedom. He could have not opened those doors. There's so many lifers in there who are never gonna get out. Whether general population, whether protective custody, SNY, it doesn't matter. Those guys in SNY were general population one time, and they were killers. Some of them just, end up saying that's it. They hung up the gloves. But knowing that God never gave up on me, He gave me something that's priceless. And something that I will always give thanks for. Just to throw in a second, just to be out here again with family. I took life for granted before. And to have my wife there when I come home, just my daughter, my sons, just to have a job, just to be on my feet now, have a vehicle. Never had a license, never owned my own car. Now I do, and it feels good. It feels good. Even to be around church folks, people that are on the right track, people that are, their mind is on success and doing great things and starting businesses and making a difference out here. It feels good to be around that, because a lot of my years that are now gone and wasted, I took it for granted I wasn't involved in that or doing any of those things. And that feels good to be involved with people who are on the right track and are trying to, make a difference and help and trying to get their careers along and have success. It's a blessing. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you.
It's amazing what's happened with you.
Oh man. I give all the glory to him, man.
Thank God.
I give all the glory.
Thank God for you and your family and your kids. And I'm glad you made it out, man.
Thank you, man. It means a lot. It means a lot. It gets me a little emotional, man. Because, man, I'm grateful.
Hey, those tears right there that you have, that you're holding back, like if they had words, what would they say?
Just gratitude, man. Just gratitude. Grateful for a second chance. Not a lot of people get it, especially in that environment. The courts are rough, tough. Criminals, convicts, gonna make mistakes. But when you actually take the time to do what, Miles does and go in there and see for yourself, men who might be even covered in tattoo, may not. But there were at one point also children